The Bible. It's the best-selling book in history, a collection of sacred texts that have shaped the faith of billions. But what if I told you that one of its most important lists, the Table of Nations from Genesis 10, isn't what we think it is? It's more than just a simple genealogy. It's a hidden historical code. First, let's focus on one small but crucial detail of this code, the sons of Shem. According to the Bible, the peoples of Mesopotamia and Syria descended from them. But one of those sons is Lud. This name leads us to Lydia, a powerful kingdom in Asia Minor that seems completely foreign to Shem's family. Why is a kingdom that is neither ethnically nor linguistically Semitic and is located hundreds of kilometers away from Mesopotamia included in this group? For a long time, scholars have considered Lydia's presence an anomaly, a mistake in the ancient text. But what if Lud isn't a mistake? What if it's the key that reveals the true historical context of the Bible and allows us to date the creation of this sacred text with an accuracy we've never imagined before? Let's start with the basics. According to Genesis 10:22, the sons of Shem are Elam, Ashur, Arphaxad, Lud, and Aram. Elam. This is the well-known kingdom east of Babylon, in modern-day western Iran along the Persian Gulf. Ashur. This is the kingdom of Assyria, one of the greatest powers of antiquity, with its capital at Nineveh. Aram. This is a collective name for the peoples of Mesopotamia and Syria. Arphaxad. This is the darkest and most mysterious of all the sons. Some scholars associate him with Babylonia or Chaldea, as their names contain similar consonants. According to later sources like the Book of Jubilees and Josephus, Arphaxad was the ancestor of the Chaldeans. This is also the lineage that leads to Abraham. And finally, Lud. This name is directly linked to Lydia, a powerful kingdom in Western Asia Minor. This is where a major problem arises, one that has puzzled scholars for centuries. While Assyria, Aram, and Babylonia were located in Mesopotamia and Syria and were Semitic peoples, Lydia just doesn't fit. Geography. Lydia was located in Asia Minor, surrounded by peoples that the Bible classifies as descendants of Japheth. It was hundreds of kilometers away from the other sons of Shem. Language and ethnicity. The Lydians were neither ethnically nor linguistically Semitic. Assyrian documents from the 7th century BCE recount that when the first Lydian envoy arrived in Nineveh, the Assyrians couldn't find a translator, which highlights how foreign the Lydian language was to the Mesopotamians. So, why does the Bible place Lud, Lydia, in the group of Shem? Why is a linguistically and ethnically different people included in this Semitic list? The answer isn't in language or race, but in politics. To understand this mystery, we must trace the history of Lydia. Our text suggests we examine 5 key periods. Lydia as an independent kingdom, circa 700 to 457 BCE. During this period, Lydia was a powerful and wealthy empire in Asia Minor, especially during the time of the legendary King Croesus. At that time, it was a rival of Greece and Persia. What's important here is that in this period, Lydia and Mesopotamia were separate and often rival kingdoms. Lydia as a Persian satrapy, 547 to 334 BCE. After Cyrus the Great conquered Lydia, it became part of the vast Persian Empire. This is the first time Lydia found itself under the same rule as Mesopotamia and Syria. But one of those sons also included the peoples of Japheth, the Ionians, and Ham, Egypt. Therefore, this period cannot be the exact context of the table. The table seems to reflect a later time when this empire had dissolved. Lydia under Alexander the Great, 334 to 323 BCE. Alexander's conquests united almost all the peoples from the Table of Nations: Ionia, the Greeks, Egypt, Ham, Lydia, and Mesopotamia. The idea of a unified kingdom is even stronger, but the borders still don't match. Alexander's empire was too large. The period of the Diadochi, 323 to 328 BCE. After Alexander the Great's death in 323 BCE, his empire fell apart. His generals, the Diadochi, began to fight among themselves for control. The political map of the Eastern Mediterranean was redrawn almost every year. During this chaotic period, Lydia was united with Syria and Mesopotamia only twice. The first time was between 315 to 312 BCE under the rule of General Antigonus. But this doesn't fit either, as Antigonus also controlled Cappadocia, which was part of the peoples of Japheth. The moment of truth, after 281 BCE. The second time, and this is the moment of truth, is after 281 BCE. After Seleucus killed his rival Lysimachus, he united Lydia, Mesopotamia, and northern Syria under one rule. This is how the Seleucid Empire was born. After 278 BCE, the wars of the Diadochi ended, and three stable kingdoms were formed: the Antigonids in Macedonia, the Ptolemies in Egypt, and the Seleucids, who ruled Lydia, northern Syria, and Mesopotamia. It is this period, between 278 and 246 BCE, that provides the ideal context for the Table of Nations. All the sons of Shem, Elam, Ashur, Arphaxad, Lud, and Aram, were located within a single state, the Seleucid Empire. At the same time, the sons of Ham, Egypt, and Japheth, the Greeks, were outside this empire. This means that the Table of Nations reflects the political realities of the late 3rd century BCE. This allows us to date it with incredible accuracy, between 278 BCE and 269 BCE. Why specifically 269 BCE? Because that's when the translation of the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible, including Genesis, into Greek, known as the Septuagint, is believed to have been completed. So, the presence of Lud, Lydia, among the sons of Shem is not a mistake. On the contrary, it's a brilliant historical detail. It allows us to look into the past and understand that the creators of the biblical text were deeply immersed in the political events of their time. They used ancient genealogy to create a map of the world that reflected not only lineage, but also their contemporary geopolitics. This isn't just a religious text, but an important historical document waiting to be deciphered.
We continue with the descendants of Japheth. These peoples are presented as inhabitants of regions located in the western and northern parts of the world known to the Bible's authors. From the perspective of Jerusalem, these territories include Media, Armenia, Pontus, Cappadocia, Bithynia, and the Greek cities of Ionia, places located clockwise around Asia Minor. Let's start with Media. It was one of the wealthiest provinces of the Seleucid Empire. Logically, it should have been classified as part of the descendants of Shem, since Shem was associated with Mesopotamia and the Seleucid territories. But the Table of Nations classifies Media as a descendant of Japheth, that is, outside the Seleucid kingdom. Why? The answer lies in one specific event. After Alexander the Great's death, a significant part of Media, called Media Atropatene, gained independence under the rule of the local ruler Atropates. Atropates had been a satrap of Media under Darius III, but after Darius's loss at the Battle of Gaugamela, he declared himself king. Thus, the classification of Madai, Media, as a son of Japheth, i.e. outside the Seleucid kingdom, shows that the text of Genesis had specifically in mind Media Atropatene, the easternmost part of the Anti-Taurus, which gained independence after the fall of the Persian Empire. The same pattern is repeated with the other sons of Japheth. Armenia, once part of the Persian Empire, effectively gained independence after the Battle of Gaugamela. Although Alexander appointed a satrap, the pretense of an Armenian satrapy was soon abandoned. By 317 BCE, it was ruled by a local satrap, and after 302 BCE by a local king named Ardoates. The kingdom of Pontus arose in the area of the northern coast of Asia Minor. Its founder, Mithridates II, declared himself king in 281 to 280 BCE and created an anti-Seleucid coalition. Cappadocia, which was not conquered by Alexander, was the scene of complex struggles among his successors. But around 301 BCE, the local ruler Ariarathes II managed to regain power with the help of the Armenian army and expel the Macedonians from the region. Bithynia, another area that was never fully conquered by Alexander. It achieved full independence when the local ruler Zipoates declared himself king in 297 BCE. Bithynia managed to repel repeated Seleucid attacks, including under the rule of Seleucus I and Antiochus I. Every one of these kingdoms fought for its independence from the rule of the Diadochi, and especially from the Seleucid Empire. We can't forget about Ionia, a group of 12 Greek cities on the western coast of Asia Minor. These cities, though under Persian rule, were liberated by the Macedonians and remained technically independent during Seleucid control of Asia Minor. Their independence is also included in the group of the sons of Japheth. By putting all these pieces of the puzzle together, we can draw one extremely important conclusion. All these territories, Media Atropatene, Armenia, Pontus, Cappadocia, Bithynia, and Ionia, were under Persian rule but achieved independence from the Seleucid Empire in the period between 301 and 280 BCE. It is this political reality that was reflected in the classification of the sons of Japheth in the Table of Nations. If the authors of the text included these territories as independent, it means they were writing at a time when these kingdoms were independent of the Seleucids. This fact gives us an extremely precise time frame. The analysis of the political borders shows that the Table of Nations, and specifically the P source, was written somewhere in the period between 278 and 269 BCE.
We continue with Javan, one of the sons of Japheth, who was considered the ancestor of the Ionians, that is, the Greeks. In the text of Genesis 10, 4 main territories are listed under the name of Javan: Cyprus, Rhodes, Cilicia, and the Ionian coasts of Asia Minor. At first glance, this is just a list of territories that had a strong Greek component, but for historians, this list is extremely important. It's like a map that leads us to a specific era. If we can determine exactly when these 4 regions were grouped together in this way, we can discover the text's true date. Let's start with one of the most important clues, the island of Rhodes. At the end of the 5th century BCE, Rhodes was subordinate to the Persians, then to the Athenians, Spartans, and Macedonians. But after Alexander the Great's death in 323 BCE, Rhodes declared its independence. In 305–304 BCE, the city endured one of the most famous sieges in ancient history. Demetrius, the son of Antigonus, surrounded the island with his troops and fleet. But here's the key event. Ptolemy I Soter, the ruler of Egypt, sent a relief fleet loaded with provisions and soldiers. The siege was lifted, and in gratitude, the Rhodians established a cult to Ptolemy as savior, Ptolemy Soter. To celebrate the victory, they sold Demetrius's siege machines and funded the construction of the famous Colossus of Rhodes, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. The fact that Rhodes is mentioned in the Table of Nations as an independent city shows that the text was written after 304 BCE. Our next clue is Cilicia. For much of its history, Cilicia was under Persian rule, but after Alexander the Great's conquests, many Greeks settled there. After Alexander's death, Cilicia became a battlefield, with control over it shifting between warring kingdoms. In 310 to 309 BCE, Ptolemy I Soter briefly seized the western cities of Cilicia. But the key period is the First Syrian War, from about 276 to 272 BCE. During this war, Ptolemy II Philadelphus established control over the western parts of Cilicia, as well as other coastal regions. This fact is confirmed by an amazing source, the work Idylls by the Greek poet Theocritus, written in Alexandria between 273 and 270 BCE, which explicitly lists Cilicia as one of Ptolemy II's possessions. So, we have a limited window of time in which these territories were under the control of the Ptolemies. Let's look at the other sons of Javan, Cyprus and the Ionian coasts.
Cyprus, which had a Persian satrap, was constantly disputed by Alexander's successors until Ptolemy I finally annexed it around 294 BCE. The island remained under Ptolemaic control throughout the period under review. As for the Ionian coastal regions, Caria, Lycia, Pamphylia, they were also under Persian control before being liberated by the Macedonians. Then, during the First Syrian War in 274 BCE, the Ptolemaic fleet achieved decisive naval superiority and seized these coastal regions. They became part of the Ptolemaic Empire for a certain period. By gathering all these clues, we get an amazing picture. The fact that all the territories listed as sons of Javan, Cyprus, Rhodes, Cilicia, and Ionia, were under the control or strong influence of the Ptolemies in the same period points us to an extremely specific time frame. This is the period between 273 and 269 BCE. This discovery is of fundamental importance. It provides us, once again, with an objective basis for dating the P source of Genesis, from which this part of the Table of Nations was compiled. It was not written centuries earlier, but was contemporary with the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Old Testament, which was created in Alexandria. But why did the biblical author include these specific regions? This is because the Table of Nations was not written for a scientific purpose, but was a political document. The classification of the peoples was not based on race or language, but on political alliances and influences. However, there is another interesting aspect. Although the territories were under the control of the Ptolemies, whose domain is associated with Ham, the author assigns them to Japheth. This may be a sign that, although he used information from Ptolemaic sources, the author himself did not approve of Ptolemaic expansionism. This is a strong reminder that even biblical texts were influenced by geopolitics and reflected certain political attitudes.
Now let's turn to the sons of Ham. Genesis chapter 10 says, "The sons of Ham were Cush, Mizraim, Put, and Canaan. And the sons of Cush were Seba, Havilah, Sabta, Rama, and Sabteca. And the sons of Rama, Sheba and Dedan." At first glance, this just looks like a dry list of names. But when we start to compare them with the history of the era of Alexander the Great and his successors, an incredible picture emerges. Traditionally, these names have been interpreted as the ancestors of the peoples in Egypt and the surrounding territories. Mizraim and Ham are ancient names for Egypt. Put is most often associated with Libya. And Cush is the biblical transliteration of the name used by the Egyptians for Nubia, or modern-day Ethiopia. But here's where it gets interesting. These correspondences fit remarkably well with the Ptolemaic kingdom during the period between 273 and 270 BCE. Let's look at each name and see how it fits into this Hellenistic framework. Canaan as a son of Ham. According to the text, Canaan, which covers a large part of modern-day Israel and Palestine, is presented as a descendant of Ham. This is strange if we try to reconcile it with the period of ancient Israel, when Canaan was independent or in conflict. But look at the Hellenistic period. After 301 BCE, southern Syria, including Canaan, was under Ptolemaic control. The representation of Canaan as a son of Ham, i.e., as part of the Egyptian sphere of influence, is a perfect reflection of this political reality. Put, Libya. Put is related to the name Putaya, which appears on a stele from about 513 BCE and corresponds to Cyrenaica. This is an area in modern-day eastern Libya, which was also under the control of the Ptolemies. Cush, Ethiopia. Although the Ptolemies did not rule all of Ethiopia, Ptolemy II sent military expeditions there. Their successes were so significant that the poet Theocritus, in his Idyll 17, written between 273 and 270 BCE, lists Ethiopia as a Ptolemaic possession. This is key evidence that the list in Genesis reflects precisely this Hellenistic propaganda, not ancient history. But the most amazing part is the list of the sons of Cush: Seba, Havilah, Sabta, Rama, Sabteca, Sheba, and Dedan. These names are not just abstract concepts. They correspond to the Arabian and African coasts of the Red Sea. Ptolemy II Philadelphus was extremely active in this region. Between 278 and 276 BCE, he financed an expedition led by Ariston who systematically mapped these coasts. At the same time, Ptolemy II built a serious naval presence in the Red Sea, establishing colonies on both the Arabian and African coasts. Sheba is the Sabaean kingdom in southwestern Arabia. Didon is an important city on the main caravan route along the Arabian coast. Sabta and Sabteca are variations of the name of the capital of the kingdom of Hadramaut. Each of these names corresponds to regions explored by Aristotle and aimed at being included in Ptolemy's sphere of influence. Although the Ptolemies eventually gave up these claims after 270 BCE, the list of the sons of Cush in Genesis perfectly reflects their exaggerated claims of control over the Red Sea, just as Theocritus describes them. This incredible correspondence leads us to an irrefutable conclusion. The part about the sons of Ham in Genesis 10 was written in a period contemporary with Theocritus and his work. It is a reflection of Ptolemaic propaganda from the period 273 to 270 BCE, immediately after the First Syrian War. Here is a part of Theocritus's Idyll 17. Overall, Ptolemy the Lord holds sway. Yes, and a part of Phoenicia he takes for himself, and from Arabia and Syria and Libya, and from the dark-skinned Ethiopians. All the sea and the land and the roaring rivers acknowledge the power of Ptolemy. This poem, written at the same time, lists the same territories, Arabia, Ethiopia, Libya, Syria, that are also included in Ham's genealogy. This cannot be a mere coincidence. This is a sure sign that the author of this biblical text was influenced by Ptolemaic sources or was part of the Ptolemaic kingdom, which controlled Judea at that time.
Egypt and southern Syria. Canaan, the son of Ham, represents the Ptolemaic rule over Palestine and southern Syria. Shem and Japheth represent the Seleucid Empire. More specifically, Japheth represents the Ionian Greeks as a main component of the Seleucids, and Shem represents the Seleucids themselves. The phrase that God will enlarge Japheth and that he will dwell in the tents of Shem is interpreted as a reference to the Greek rule of the Seleucids over the territories of Shem. And the curse of Canaan predicts that he will become a servant of Shem and Japheth. That is, he will fall under the rule of the Seleucid Greeks. This narrative is not a historical chronicle, but a political manifesto. It has a clearly expressed pro-Seleucid and anti-Ptolemaic bias. Which historical event inspired the creation of this political manifesto? Everything points to the First Syrian War. 276 BCE. The war begins when Ptolemy II occupies Damascus. 274 BCE. The Seleucid king Antiochus I plans a full-scale invasion of Egypt in an alliance with Magus of Cyrene. At this time, it seemed that the end of the Ptolemaic Empire was possible. 273 to 272 BCE. Both invasion attempts fail. The war ends, leaving southern Syria firmly in the hands of the Ptolemies. The curse of Canaan, which predicts a Seleucid victory and the conquest of southern Syria, Canaan, was relevant precisely in the period when the Seleucids were planning the invasion, around 274 BCE. After the war ended in 273 to 272 BCE without a change of borders, such a hope was no longer realistic. Scholars believe that the curse was originally directed at Ham, not Canaan. That is, it was directed against the entire Ptolemaic Empire. But why was it changed then? The answer is simple: political caution. During the First Syrian War, the Jewish people were under the rule of the Ptolemies. A direct curse against Ham, the Ptolemies, would have been extremely dangerous and could have been interpreted as a rebellion. That is why the authors decided to change the object of the curse to Canaan, a less provocative but still clearly understandable symbol of Ptolemaic rule over Palestine. Thus, a systematic review of all the evidence leads to one final conclusion. The P source and the final form of the story of the Curse of Canaan from the J source date from 273 to 272 BCE, the last years of the First Syrian War. This discovery doesn't just rewrite the chronology of the documentary hypothesis, but also sheds light on how biblical texts were formed. They are not just static, timeless scriptures, but dynamic documents that have changed and adapted to reflect and support specific political realities and hopes of their time.
A story about a drunken father was actually transformed into a prayer for victory in one of the most important wars of antiquity. What do you think of this incredible revelation? Does it change your understanding of the Bible? Share your opinion in the comments below. If you liked this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss our future historical investigations. Thank you for being with us. Until next time.